Task Force meeting for November the 6th. We now have a quorum. Thank you very much. And I'd like to say that we are holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Snail First Nation. And we have any late items? No late items. Perfect. Can we have somebody move the adoption of the agenda, please? Doug, seconder. Bob, thank you. All in favor? Just raise your hands. Thank you. The minutes that were sent out last week sometime, I don't remember
beginning of this week.
Beginning this week, okay. Well,
or no, last week, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, today's Friday. Did everybody receive it? And if so, can I have a motion to adopt them as circulated? So moved by Zenny, thank you. And seconder, all I need is a hand up. Thanks, Bob. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, now we'll get into, there's no presentations or delegations, but we do have Steve Turner, or Steve Nichols, sorry, on the line. Yep, he's ready to go.
Top right.
There he is, top right. Okay. Morning, Steve. If you wanted to get into the report on the one that everybody got a copy of, and hopefully have time to read. You're muted, I think.
No, I think I'm ready to go. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, good morning, everybody. What I'll do is, there's a couple different ways we could do this. I was weighing whether I should just make a brief presentation and then open it up for discussion, or actually go through the entire report in detail. I think that might take longer than getting the U.S. election results. So I think what I'll do is I'll just take 5 or 10 minutes here to briefly go through it and give you some context. I mean, there's a lot of material here. So I'll just briefly go through it, and then we can open it up and start talking about, whatever issues, whatever thoughts you have. So let me just I'm going to try to share my screen here, Bill. I'm not sure if it's going to work.
Okay, I think it should work. Go ahead. Yep.
Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just go through this briefly. I think the front end of the report is fairly straightforward. The current situation, essentially almost all of this material came from the current situation report, so I won't dwell on that. That's already been finalized, unless anybody has any specific questions about the content of the message here, but we can come back to that. I'd like to go through this quickly, and then we can come back if there's any discussion points. The one thing that was not in the current situation assessment was the survey feedback. So there may be some questions there. I'd be happy to answer them, but I think what we got back, especially from the community survey, was fairly interesting, and I decided to enter some quotes here. I think there was some really good feedback out of the Imagine Nanaimo stuff. So again, if you want to come back and talk about that, we can do that. The strategic direction we've already gone over. So the vision and the mission, the focus areas, you've already seen this material. The principles we decided to insert after discussion with Bill and Aaron. I think we wanted to include this because once we get down into implementation and you start talking about hiring staff to be involved with the implementation of this, you want to sort of lay the groundwork, so to speak, those underlying, principles or policies, and this is not really highly detailed, but it's just a snapshot of the thinking that sort of underlies the whole strategy. These are, principles are different than goals and objectives. These are not goals and objectives. These are the these are the principles that sort of drive discussion and decision making for the organization. Again, we can come back to this if you have any thoughts on it. The vision and the mission, we've gone over previously. The focus areas you'll recognize, the goals you'll recognize. We've seen this, so sort of concordance or the integration or the interaction, if you will, between the goals and the focus areas, just so everybody's clear about how this all fits together. And the strategy in brief. This is really an executive summary type of effort, so this is sort of a snapshot of our 6 focus areas. You see there's quite a few initiatives in here, especially on the economic capital and the business development. Those are probably our 2 major sections, but we do have the human capital, the social capital. And you'll recognize most of the content in here, almost everything except perhaps on the placemaking side. I think everything here came up directly in the workshop or the focus groups back in June. So we've tried our best to incorporate those comments and that sense of priority, what needs to be done. Hopefully we haven't left anything behind here, but of course, that's why we're here today. If you have any comments on any of this stuff. I'm just going to take a couple minutes to go around to each of these focus areas. And the economic capital section has already been reviewed by the city. Bill and Amber have already seen this. We've had some comment. We did some back and forth. Some of the other city departments have seen these initiatives. So they've already been vetted within the city. So we're pretty confident about the content and direction of this particular focus area. The human capital one it's very important in terms of how it fits into the other focus areas. I mean, really, this economic development strategy is really about skills. It's about having the people and having the population and having the workforce that's going to allow us to move into the next phase of this city's history. I mean, we're going to be almost doubling the population over the next 25 to 30 years. So if you just think about it in that context alone, a lot of this is going to have to be driven off the human capital envelope. So we've got some stuff in there. There's not a lot of strategies in here, but I think we hit behind those in terms of keeping our eye, especially on the talent attraction and retention. The social capital one, again, we tried to pull on that feedback that we heard back in June during the focus group. We have a lot of sort of people there from this sector of the economy, from sort of the NGOs and the people who are involved in things like poverty reduction and homelessness. We have quite a bit of that. And this is sort of on the edges of a normal economic development realm, but increasingly we're seeing that things like homelessness and housing, poverty reduction, we're starting to see them being involved more in the economic development envelope just because they're becoming more pervasive in terms of overall community economic development.
Quick question, if I may,
Sure.
Go ahead.
Councillor. Thank you. When we look at this, and we've got the First Nations under the social capital, I'm wondering if maybe they shouldn't be more prominent in the business development under Indigenomics as well, if they're really placed well under social capital.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what we're here for today. I mean, I tried to get a hold of Fairbairn a couple of times, was unsuccessful. I mean, we do talk about Petroplus in here, and, yeah, I mean, you know, if that's where you want to go with this, we could certainly build a higher profile in the business development section. Denny, let me I just got another minute here on the rest of these, and then we can open it up and decide what we want to do there. So can we park that just for a minute and come back to it?
Yeah, that's fine, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so the innovation, the business development, this is probably, I would think this is probably the most important focus area for this strategy moving forward, because it talks really about how do we build stronger connections and a tighter network with our business community. And they're the foundation of not just business development and internal development and employment and household income and all that good stuff, but they're really critical for the placemaking and attraction and some of these other focus areas. So the business development, especially the business retention, is something that's a really important sort of program area for this strategy. The innovation and technology is an interesting one, because now this was done by our partners with Catalyst. Ted Weicker worked on this section. He had a lot of discussions, a lot of interviews with the tech sector, and we were sort of struggling on where to go with this particular focus area. And where we landed on in these sets of strategies is it's really about building a stronger tech network and ecosystem, and not so much focusing on specific projects, but trying to build a stronger base amongst our tech companies and also other companies who have technology inputs and sort of have a connection to that tech ecosystem. So this particular focus area is really about building that base and building a better foundation, and of course connecting with other tech partners that are already doing the program. We talked a bit about that in there. The last one about placemaking, this is quite a long section. Lee Malo, who most of you met during the workshops, prepared this section. And so again, this is about building a better foundation and a better sense about where, Nanaimo should be going, and building a better toolkit, if you will. And during those sessions, we did have quite a bit of discussion about, rebranding Nanaimo and getting a stronger, getting sort of a stronger marketing position and sense of place and confidence in who we are, and projecting ourselves to the outside world and outside investors. So those are the 6 focus areas. Again, there's a lot of strategies in these pages, and I think from here on out, rather than going through these in detail, we should just open it up for discussion and let me know what you think and what changes we need to make for the next round.
Thanks, Steve. The challenge we have right now is I see there's 10 participants, and I only see myself and Doug here, and then I don't know if we expand to...
You got to stop sharing this. Oh, okay.
Well, morning, Andre. Dave, are you there? Oh, Jolene's there? Perfect. Okay, so anybody who wants to say anything, if you just wave your hand, and I'll keep track of who's to speak first, second, third, etc. So we'll open the floor. Anybody have any comments? Fine bunch. Go ahead, Doug.
So I thank you. I think it looks great. So I'm keen about that. I'd like to support Cindy's comment about making sure that under business development and or economic capital that the First Nation partnerships are highlighted, whatever the language there is in Diginomics or whatever it turns out to be. I think it needs to be there. I think it also needs to be there under social capital, and I would change the language First Nation economic reconciliation to economic health and Aboriginal health and well-being there. And I'd also like where the Health and Housing Task Force bullet to say something like City of Nanaimo Health and Housing Initiatives, because the task force are going to have a limited lifespan. So it'll be out of date as soon as the task force disbands.
Next, Doug. Who's next? Anybody got anything else to add? Because I have a whole list. So. Go ahead, Zanny. No? Okay. Who else? Nobody else? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Jason.
If we want to change something within the context of it, can we send some notes through, or do we need to discuss it here?
What's your preference?
It's just on the court initiatives on page 30. It's just some very brief notes and just some specifics that if we can make minor changes to that, I can just send them through.
Yeah, I think that's probably the way to go here. If it's all right with you, Bill, is if there's specific language or things like copy edits and stuff, please send them through to me. And I think that's the best way to do it. So today we would talk about major issues and, sort of major changes to the document. So.
Andre.
Thanks, Susan. Now, just to expand a little bit on what's already in there, and I'm very happy to see it in there, is that Health and Housing Task Force bullet. I'm not sure how that's the right group to work with. We should be collaborating with that group. But in terms of the strategies that we're going to undertake with them, I think they're focused on the concept. I think it's a good idea of community economic development. Typically that's economic development where it's more centered on bringing up the more disadvantaged and helping them out. So I'm not sure if we need to explicitly list that as a strategy under social capital, or if we want to list the organization we're working with. But the idea of community economics, I think, is supposed to be captured by both force in there.
Yeah, that's a good.
What are you saying?
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm just wondering, Andre, are you suggesting that one of those bullets needs to change or be removed?
Under strategies, Health and Housing Task Force isn't a strategy, I guess, is what I'm saying. Working with the Health and Housing strategies on community economic development is kind of a strategy, but that being said, it's a little wordy. But I think that if that's the strategy, well, that's the group we're working with.
I got you.
I think that's a really good point, Andre. I think that'll hit the mark nicely. Yeah.
Okay.
Zenny.
Yes, thank you. It's a good point. I'm not sure if Health and Housing Task Force just on its own is a strategy, but I think what many on council, and we've had conversations in the business sector is this new framework of the donut economy. And I know that this is just the beginning of the conversations, and we had Dr. Turner present at the last meeting, but somehow making sure we're incorporating that type of donut framework, that this is something we will be exploring as we move down and creating these strategies, because I believe these are always working documents anyways and should be amended as they go along.
Yeah, okay.
And Dave?
I was going to make a similar point. I think it shows up in your measuring performance section. It makes sense to incorporate that because the donut economy is a measurement framework, and so when that comes along, you get a chance to roll it in there.
Okay, I've got Dave and then Zinni. Did you want to say something again? No? Okay.
In my review, it's my issue is I counted up 118 strategies, and I counted up what I thought was about 29 to 30 more research projects within those strategies. And so my concern is when I read a document, I have no idea what the priorities are for economic development, and I would like to see some type of 5-year action plan that said, in year 1, we're going to prioritize this. Because I just feel like this is going to, what are we going to pick to do? And that's my overall concern.
Thanks, Dave. Kathy?
Okay, just a quick response to that. The action plan at the end, which is currently not in there, will deal with specifically that question. So we will list out the strategy into this. I just provided a template, a table there, but that will be filled out, and we'll talk about when these would be done, what the cost implications would be, who the partners would be, and what the outcomes would be. So you would get a much better sense of your priorities when you see those tables filled out. But we will do that.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, Kathy, and then go ahead, Dave. Dave, did you want to?
So the thing I really want to talk about is the task force is what do we think are the priorities? Because that's where I think we can maybe provide the most value.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Steve, how would you envision us identifying those priorities?
Well, we could either discuss it today if we have time, or you guys could sort of give me some written feedback if you want to discuss it more separately or offline. It's up to you.
I guess we'll see how much time we have today, but maybe we have a session that's just, maybe we would help prioritize them for you. We could get the group together in a workshop and maybe have them roll up on the wall and just kind of go through them.
Yeah, I would suggest maybe we wait and do it at another time so that we have time to think about it between now and then, and do what Bill was suggesting.
Yeah, so what I would suggest is on the next draft, we can fill out the action plan table. That would give you an understanding of where we think the priorities are, and then that would be an opportunity for you to say, well, no, yes, no, yes. So I think that would be an easier way to do it, because we definitely have opinions and recommendations on what we call core strategy, and then what other strategies, where the priorities would be for those other strategies. So we could do it that way.
Okay.
If it would be good.
Thanks, Steve. That sounds good. Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also agree that the number of strategies is a lot and the priorities, and I prefer the method, Steve, that you're talking about, is you guys take a kick at it, because some of them cascade, or some of them need to be done first before you go into second one, because we may not be aware of that. So Mr. Chair, I have a whole bunch of comments, and I would just ask you to tell me to stop, because I don't expect responses, and I don't know if some of this stuff has already been approved, or we are now, this is the opportunity to discuss. So I'll just rattle on, but cut me off, please, if I'm taking too much time. So the first one is, yeah?
I said I'm good at that.
Okay, thank you. So the first one is defining regional and local. Some of this document speaks to regional, some of it speaks to Nanaimo, and I think that we need some real clarity as to if the city is funding this, how far into regional does this venture, and so that ensures that there's a balance that benefits Nanaimo, which probably, to me, most of the regional stuff will, but I don't want it too far into the regional so that we lose our way. The other thing is, echoes on the implementation plan. You said you'll look at the strategies and all that stuff, but this I understood is in a 10-year plan, so we're looking at like the first third and the second third and the final third. Is that kind of how it's envisioned? And then who's the lead? We talk about in the table what are the resources, but who's the lead? In terms of the principles, is that something that we should be adopting separately so it's included in this document, so then it is a policy statement about how this plan moves forward and how staff and volunteers, what they have to commit to as a way of working, as a methodology, as a culture in moving this forward? And do all the strategies fit through that filter, or are there some that don't quite fit or are awkward in that we need to spend more emphasis on? In several areas of the document, and I didn't say what pages, I see references to a number of committees, and there was perhaps the mayor's task force, there was another committee, and I think that committees are great, but they are time suckers of resources. And so is there something that's more ad hoc that's needed? Is there a blue ribbon group that we need to put together that comes together when there's certain needs, and that the committee structure is a subset of one of let's say there's an agency, that the agency has these subset committees, so that they're not really leeching time, valuable time of, there's not going to be a lot of resources. In the area where it talks about dealing with the board, let's say, again, assuming there's an agency, it talks about policies, but really a board policy manual is what's needed that encompasses all of that. And one of the things that I think we might need to speak to is areas of making sure that we develop and cultivate leadership, that there's strong board development, and that there's volunteerism component, not only as a stepping stone in the labor market, but also as a way of encouraging contribution broadly to these efforts. And then the final thing,
Well, finally, go ahead.
is $1 million. Like, I know we talked about somewhere between 300,000 and $1 million. So recommending $1 million may not be palatable in terms of where council is going, and I'm not sure I could support $1 million effort at this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Those are my comments.
Steve, did you get all that?
Yeah, I think I got most of it. The regional local, not a problem. We can deal with that. Again, the action plan, we'll talk about the priorities and the leadership there. The principles, those principles, is really, it's up to you guys. I mean, if you think that you want to do some sort of, I mean, right now, these principles are just articulated in this plan. They don't exist anywhere else. If you want to strengthen those and port those over, for example, into your incorporation documents, your articles of incorporation, if you go ahead with the standalone agency, then by all means, again, it's up to you guys. So I'm fine with that. I agree wholeheartedly on the committee references and sort of the time commitment implied by those. I think the mechanics of the logistics of that really will be determined with this, with the standalone agency and how you set it up, how you structure the board, how you work your partners in. I mean, there's a lot of details that are yet to come on that. But generally, yes, you don't want you know, too many committees and a lot of meetings that, you know, may or may not lead to any concrete effort. So whether a single blue ribbon group or committee is the way to go, I don't really have any thoughts on that right now. And again, I think a lot of this has to be thought out when you talk about your articles of incorporation and your board structure and your governance. But yes, the leadership thing, as we talk about that, we talk about board training in that section, is very important. So I think for the next draft, if you want more detail in that implementation section in that chapter 6, then you know, with things like leadership training and that sort of stuff, we can discuss that. The $1 million, you know, we were, as a team, we were thinking, you know, should we, at this stage, should we put a number in there? And I think that it is a lot of money, and I think that, but we have some fairly strong feelings amongst our group, particularly Lee, who's been involved with economic development, as most of you know by now, for many, many years, and was in Vancouver and all the rest of it. A strategy like this, what you want to avoid on a strategy like this is to have poor results or poor outcomes and sort of getting lost in sort of turning your wheels and not really being able to make projects go and make them stick. And really, to make that happen, it's not about committees and it's not about you know, the board, which is really a governance tool. It's about who the people are on the ground sort of driving these strategies forward. And you really cannot do it on a shoestring budget. So I'm not going to get into the details there. I think it's a bridge you guys are going to have to cross. I'm not saying it can't be done for less than $1 million, but I'm just saying in general, for a city the size of Nanaimo, if you go across this country, that's probably an average economic development budget. But there's all sorts of, you know, there's all sorts of give and take, depending upon what you're actually going to land on and what you're actually going to fund in this strategy.
Actually, okay, next we have Andre, and then Bob, and then Jason.
Okay, no, I think it's great. The discussion around priorities is a good one to have, especially after we've got the action items in front of us. So I agree with the basic process there. Now, the one thing that we do have to be cognizant is that there is going to be a new organization with a new board and new staff, and they have to have some sort of leeway to work within those. And of course, the world changes. So, I mean, I agree that we should rank our priorities, but it's going to be up to the new organization to determine, with the available budget we now have, what can we accomplish in a work plan. So, recommendations on priorities and some actions to get going by all means, but we don't want to get too prescribed that it replaces what could be their work plan.
Yeah, thank you, Andre. That's a very good point. So this is an economic development strategy. I mean, what you do with the strategies is, and it's good for 3, 5, 10 years. So that's why there's so much content in here. But what you do every year, an economic development officer would sit down and develop an annual work plan. And that annual work plan is where the detail comes in, where you actually fit the initiatives that you want to do with your budget. And so as Andre just said, that's where the details occur. So this being a strategy, we only make recommendations and we only make so many prescriptions down to a certain level because you do need that flexibility. So thanks for that.
Okay.
And another point I had, that I can continue there, Mr. Chair, is on social capital, there is a lot of discussion, especially at the council level, of incorporating the concepts of a donut economy. And, something like community economic development speaks a little bit to the social piece, but I don't see anywhere in here where we're talking about environmental capital and the importance of the region to kind of maintain what we have and, have an economy that minimizes segregation to the local environment of some sort. I think not only is it important to have it, I think it would be right up the alley as to where our council would be interested in. So I'm not sure if it should be just a social capital or social/environmental capital, or you fit it under there, but I do think that mentioning the environment and possibly even the concept of circular economies or exploring that, I think should be incorporated somewhere.
Okay, Bob, and then Jason, and then Gillette.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to make a comment regarding the strategy action plan. In my opinion, this is a very important part of the strategy, and even though I acknowledge Andre's comments that the new board's going to want to put their own stamp on it, I think it's important that this group identify what those, I think we've talked about previously, as kind of the top 5, but certainly it could be more than that. But I think if this group can identify those specific actions that need to be taken sooner rather than later, yes, it might only be something for the first few years, but for a new organization, a new board, I think that kind of guidance is really important to come out of this thinking process. So I'm keen to try and move that forward. I have this recollection that we actually, in one of our earlier meetings, listed some of those top 5, although I didn't go looking through the minutes. But Steve, to your point about having you identify what you see as a group first and then circulating those, I think that's the correct way to go at it. I would just encourage that we do that sooner rather than later so we can all do some thinking about it. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Bob. Jason?
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
Honestly, it was right in line with what Andre and Bob were talking about as far as the application of the strategy when you hire your CEO and they have a chance to hire their staff. If you're going to do it 3, 5, 10 years is probably far too long to get too dialed in on strategy if you don't have someone in place with staff who have their own vision, and not their own vision, but their own ideas how to apply the vision and what they may see, and having the flexibility to be able to adapt. I think what Bob and Andre, I would echo the same comments, but I would even go so far as to ask, have we dialed in when a CEO, or when we not stop this process, but when do we start looking to the staffing and the transition from when this committee kind of starts looking towards hiring a CEO? Would it be after the 5 priorities, or when does that come in? And I think the 5 priorities, Bob, to your point, was talked about last time, and there was 5 points brought up.
So Jason, Bill here, I guess our goal would be to get, that I'm working towards right now, is to hopefully get a draft strategy to council through our governance and priority committee in December, and then that would then go to council in January for approval, hopefully. And then after that, we'd be starting to implement things. So that would be the starting to work on the structure of the external agency, getting the board in place, all the work Kathy's talked about in terms of governance policies and recruitment. Internally, the manager of economic development position, for budgetary constraints won't be, that person won't be starting until July. So they're starting 6 months into the year. So I think really the first bit of next year is probably getting things set up and maybe working on a few of the key strategies that we identify as priorities, and then the latter part of next year would be kind of getting going on things.
What's the date of your December meeting?
14th?
Thank you, Scott.
Okay,
It's only a few
you
weeks.
okay, Jason, any more? Okay, Jolene?
Good morning. I just, one of the things that we're talking about funding and financing and those types of things is that I don't believe you can starve an organization to success. And also that undercapitalizing is not always the best way to go. So I would agree with Steve in regards to that. And I'll be very frank, our office is a small office. We have 3 staff, and we do not do the level of engagement and things that other organizations like the prosperity agency would do. And our budget is $365 a year. And that's a slim budget. Yes, we serve a region, but we not to the extent that this organization would serve. So I think that if we want to have any form of success, that's just a baseline number here, and we don't have anything fancy. We don't fly anywhere. We don't do much of anything in our staffing. We are not paid any exuberant amounts. So just letting you know that I think that probably to do it, you would need to have at least $500,000 or more at a minimum basis. So that's just food for thought around that. For me, I guess looking at the strategy and looking into that budget is that, you know, looking at the priorities and then saying, what would it take us to implement those priorities so that we would be able to come up with some kind of a timeline and some kind of a budgetary amount. Because I think that looking at our priorities and what the strategies are is that would really help to frame what we'd be asking council to put aside for funds for us to be able to actually implement this and make it happen. Are we doing any of that preliminary to say that this could be a home? This is how much the home would cost, the infrastructure for the home, for it to be housed in, what kind of salary ranges, so that we have some kind of an idea to what we would actually put forward to council in regards to what we could implement within that first year and what kind of staffing we would ramp up with. Just some questions from my perspective.
So
we've done the rough costing for the positions and for office space. And then the rest of it really is up to the strategy, I think, to decide what actions we want to prioritize and the cost behind those.
the one thing that, if I could just interject, one thing that we need to, first of all, be aware of and determine is who are the Class B shareholders and what are they bringing to the table. I mean, we've indicated that when we met with them, that potential shareholders, that it doesn't necessarily have to be cash. It could be, for example, office space that they would bring to the table as opposed to a check, as an example. So, it's a bit, in my opinion, a bit premature to be sitting down and saying, well, this is exactly what the budget needs to be, because we're not even sure yet what the expenses are going to be. And that, I think, will come to the fore once we've determined who the actual shareholders are and what they're going to bring with them. If that makes any sense to you. Any other comments? Jason?
Yeah, to your point, sir, it's, for budgeting next year, our organization would need to know, right? So I think you make a good point. Are we being, what are we budgeting?
Okay, so if there's no other comments, I have a few questions. On page 50, under connecting to the tech sector, the report refers to, let me get it here. Sorry. refers to comparison with other areas. I almost refer to them as areas as opposed to municipalities. Metro Vancouver, Central Capital Region District, Central Okanagan, and Fraser Valley. And it looks like comparing the city of Nanaimo to larger areas. And I don't know whether I misunderstood that or whether or not we're looking at including kind of the Central Island in the numbers.
Yeah, no, I think that I think that first paragraph is simply saying that in the whole provincial context, you're in fifth place.
Okay, but my point is fifth place of municipalities or fifth place of areas, regions?
No, these are regional districts.
Okay, that's fine, thanks. One point, I'm assuming I'm correct here, but somebody will jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. When it's referring to the foreign trade zone, it refers to Nanaimo having it. My understanding it's all Vancouver Island. I don't know if somebody can correct me on that. Jason's nodding his head so that it is Vancouver Island.
I was on that committee. I was on that committee, all of it. I was on that committee, it's all of Vancouver Island.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Page 31, sorry if I'm being picky, but I tend to be that way. Make reference to under economic capital, the strategies. I see that establish an Nanaimo broadband task force to build community-wide movement towards the gigabyte city is mentioned twice. The first point and then the fourth point, is that supposed to be, or is that just for emphasis?
Emphasis.
Yeah, that would be the easy answer. What page are you on?
Page 31.
Okay.
That must be a priority then.
Yeah. I'll put it in a third time, just to underline it. Thanks for pointing that out.
Okay, no problem. Sandy, you have a question?
Oh, you muted, Zen.
It's just a minor typo, but to me it's very important, is under our vision, and this is on page 22, is making sure we say that Nanaimo is the city of choice. We did have it on a couple pages when we talk about it, so just a minor thing, but I think it's very important that we're not a city, but we are the city.
Good point. I think we had that discussion earlier.
Yeah. And Amber gave that comment to Steve. So, yeah.
The only other comment I'd make is on page 12 under the input. For the community service, they're talking about we also need to start using our great agricultural land for agriculture, not housing. Well, agriculture is my background, and quite frankly, within the city limits, there isn't a whole lot of agricultural land still available, and nor has there ever been a whole pile. So I don't know if that's making reference to the regional district in Nanaimo, where there is, of course, a lot more availability of such land, or whether it's just within the city. Only a minor point.
Yeah.
I'm done nitpicking. Yes, Eddie. No? Okay. Anybody else have comments, suggestions? Hearing none? Final time?
So Chair, just in terms of, I think a priority is obviously working on the implementation plan and getting Steve to give us a draft of that. Steve, can you give us a sense of how long that might take for you to get that to us? Is that a week, 2 weeks?
For what?
The implementation plan?
Oh, you mean the action plan at the end?
The action plan, thanks, sorry.
Yeah. I'll try to get it to you Yeah, definitely within 2 weeks. I'm going to try to get it to you. I'll probably get it to you before then.
If we had it at the end of next week, then we could have a meeting the following week in November.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll shoot for the 13th.
Thanks. That'd be great. And then we'll schedule a meeting the following week.
Okay, anything else you need, Steve, or you got all the?
Well, just to follow up, I mean, I've got the comments here, so there are changes to make. Jason, you said you're going to send me something, so if you have any copy of it, just email it to me, or if you don't have my email, just send it to Bill and it'll get through to me. If anybody has any other specific comments about, copy edit things or, missing commas or whatever, please let me know. And otherwise, I'll try to get the next draft to you guys. At least the action plan, but I'm going to try for a new draft by the end of next week.
That's great, Steve.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no other comments on the draft economic development strategy, then we'll move it to the next item on our agenda, which is the collaboration with the Health and Housing Task Force. I'll start off by saying that I was actually quite pleased to see that there was mention made of the value of involving representatives once we get into the strategy determination, because I look at it that without their involvement and trying to solve some of the issues we have, it's going to be really difficult to try to develop some of the challenges that we might have, particularly within the downtown portion of Iowa. But it's not just downtown, it is spread pretty much across the community. So I'm quite happy to see that was included in there. I think my opinion, so I'll start off with my opinion on this, is that I'm a little reluctant to try to, shall we say, meld the two task forces together to form one. In fact, I'm not just a little bit opposed to it, I'm quite opposed to it. Because I think it is extremely important that we have each task force complete their work and determine where the two pieces will fit together. And I don't see that happening until we almost are there. I see your hand up, Zane, so you can interrupt. Go ahead.
Thanks. And I've been very pleased with the conversation that's being bounced around a little bit in the community, in the business community, around the donut economy and us blending the economy, but looking after the environment and looking after the people. And I don't think the intention was actually to combine the two task force. Or my sense is that is not something that most people I'm speaking with really want to do. But it is to bring awareness that the two task force, the task force are going to end. But that when we move forward, that perhaps, however, the health and housing what they transition to, that there are people from both boards or whatever the governance model is that are on each other, that they know what each other is doing and that they're working together, because there is tremendous economic development within the social disorder. So the amount of funding that's coming in federally to a lot of not-for-profit agencies and the amount of building and construction that can be done contributes to our economic development, and there's a lot of money there in the social issues. So I think that it's important that these conversations happen with each other.
Thanks, Annie. So I guess the next step with regard to that is that we should make some sort of an official statement as to what we see as a go-forward plan on how we kind of look at trying to combine the two challenges once we get to the final point. And I don't know whether a motion at this point in time is appropriate. Go ahead, Doug.
Not to make a motion, but just to carry on the conversation. I have also been part of many of these conversations, some of which are surprising to me, where I hear that the Economic Development Task Force has agreed to this idea of a joint agency, and I said, well, I was at the meeting and I don't think that is what was talked about. So I actually ended up going back to the minutes from the actual meeting, which say that the Economic Development Task Force agrees that working together on social issues is fundamental to creating value in the community. I still believe that, and I still believe that that's the tone of this meeting. Social issues ultimately are woven into an economic development strategy. I think that we have gone some distance to make sure that those things are identified in the economic development strategy. We're clear that there's an overlap, but unclear that both organizations should be one or separate, and how an overlap could happen or be managed, and I think that's still to be decided. That there's strong linkages between downtown revitalization and affordable housing, and I think that's fairly self-evident. It's a good time to have discussions because the structures haven't been solidified, so all of those things are still true. I think we are moving in the direction of integrating those things. I think there is another conversation that's in the weeds right now related to donut economy or circular economy, which are donut economy in particular, I think is a terrible name for it, but it's just a measurement framework, right? And we have a blank section in this document which is measurement framework, and I see it quite a natural process. So I don't believe that a motion to say yes or no to something is required. I think that we are taking all those ideas on board, we're leaving it in, we're doing all of the things we should be doing in order to develop those ideas. So I feel like we're in good shape and have responded appropriately.
Okay, so I have Andre, Bob, Kathy, did I see your hand up? Okay, Andre?
And I do think that the intent of the motion was to ensure that, there's collaboration between the strategies. And I think we're getting pretty close to accomplishing that, especially as we look through the action items. And what we need to ensure, of course, is that if there's any overlap between the action items, that those are done in collaboration. So I think most importantly is to ensure that the strategy under council for both organizations is on the same page. I also think that, part of the discussion will kind of move towards, once we realized we were getting on the same page of strategy, was, economies of scale, saving on rent, saving on staff. I don't know if there's any staff savings, honestly, between that. I don't know if the overlap is so extreme that you could have one CEO or one, you still need different people working in different organizations. But things like rent and utilities down the road, maybe that could be explored, especially if it's out in the city building or a building, from one of our partners. But you don't want to do it to the detriment of each organization. So, I don't think that we need to say no to the discussion. I think that the discussion needs to take place to see if there's any cost savings as the organization starts to take form, and to ensure that our strategies are lined up.
Thanks, Andre. So I have Bob, followed by Kathy, and did I miss anybody? No? Okay, Bob.
Thanks, Jim. Andre covered much of what I was going to suggest. I strongly support having two separate organizations, at least at the operational level, but I thought at the previous meeting it was an elegant suggestion that they would share resources, potentially premises and some back of office staff, maybe even some accounting functions. I thought that was a very good way to ensure that there was discussion between the two organizations, and also perhaps save the community some money. So, while I strongly support two separate organizations, I think some sharing of resources might be helpful going forward.
Thanks, Bob. Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment on that is that there, in the principles, there is collaboration, or we collaborate in the principles in the, under whatever section it was with the Health and Housing Task Force. I guess we just emphasize that there are links, and it may not only be that one, but there might be so many more that links and linkages and efficiencies and all of that can happen once dialogue is created. So I think we'd want to emphasize the linkages and the collaboration, keeping in mind what the core focus of the economic strategy is.
Yes, Kathy. Bill, did we get a motion from Doug?
No, not yet.
I planted a seed with Doug to create a motion.
Oh, I see, okay. That's what the secret meeting in the corner was.
Yeah, exactly. Can you see the shared screen I put up?
Yeah, I think the same question you asked me is best asked.
So I guess, so just when you look at the motion that came from the Health and Housing Task Force,
You just make that one smaller at the very top left. Top left.
this top left.
Yep.
Thank you.
One of those three.
So the specific motion was that we explore an arm's length organization that includes economic development and social development planning coordination.
That's a motion from Health and Housing.
From Health and Housing to us, not from council.
Right, to council.
So this went to Kel and came to us. So I guess my thought was it might be worthwhile to provide a motion or response back to Health and Housing from us. And I think what I've been hearing from everyone here, I think is bang on. It's about making sure we are coordinated, that the strategies, we know where the overlaps are, where the benefits are, and we work together on all this. The agency piece is one that might be worth just saying,
More explicit.
be more explicit back to Health and Housing, saying, I leave it up to you how you want to respond in that regard, but I think that would be helpful.
Bob, just to put you on the spot, I think your comments were the most easily transformed into a motion if a motion is being requested.
Okay, I believe we need to have a motion, and I don't think the chair can make it, so to have for a response to the health and housing motion. So yes, go ahead, Andre, and then Jason.
Yeah, so I think we should, in the motion, explain that we continue to collaborate on strategy, operations, and potential cost savings, but we feel that the risks are too great combining the two mandates into one entity.
You want that included in the motion?
I don't know, but I just putting it out there for thought.
Okay. Jason, and then I saw somebody else. Okay, Jason.
Just curious about there was also going to be other maybe in the agency, some organizations, maybe within the agency there's an understanding of who communicate.
Sorry, Jason, you broke up. We couldn't hear. I couldn't hear you. Did everybody else hear?
No.
There we go.
Better.
Now you're good.
Better?
Yeah.
Sorry, I do agree it's two separate organizations. But I just wonder if maybe within the agency quarterly updates from health and housing and other, institutions locally or regionally be on the board, not just that, but maybe also list within the agency of the important key components.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Jenny?
Thank you. I'm on the same page as most of the other speakers. I think that we should word it something about the city of Nanaimo, that the health and housing and economic development work collaboratively as separate organizations, but again, sharing the resources that have been mentioned and working together. So I think that somehow is how the motion should be captured, to give the feedback to council on what the expectations are.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. The plot thickens. So we got anywhere near crafting a motion? Anybody else want to throw thoughts in there?
I'm working on one, but I'm not a great wordsmith, so.
So
Go ahead, Doug.
My attempt at a motion then would be that the Economic Development Task Force continues the preparation of its economic development strategy, which incorporates recognizes and incorporates efforts to promote health and well-being, and that it continues its pursuit of a Nanaimo Prosperity Agency focused on the implementation of the economic development strategy.
Okay. Anybody want that repeated? Does it need a second?
I can try and read that out.
You think you got it?
We'll see.
Okay.
So that the Economic Development Task Force continues preparation of its economic development strategy, which incorporates or recognizes efforts to promote health and well-being and continues the pursuit of the Nanaimo Prosperity Agency focused on the implementation of the economic development strategy, roughly.
Yeah,
Well done.
Pretty good.
I think you word by word. So did everybody hear that? Just a thumbs up would help.
Mr. Chair, if I could,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the word promote, I think we also in there want to put in and link to because it's not only this one agency, although that's the purpose of today's motion, but it could be to anything that comes up. So I think that we not only promote working together, but that we ensure there's linkages.
Okay.
I don't know how that fits in there.
So is the mover okay with adding those words?
No, I am okay. How did they get added? Do you want to try it one more time?
Do we have a seconder, first of all?
Oh,
Sorry?
Do we have a seconder?
No, yeah, okay.
So,
Okay, Zenny, are you seconding? Zenny is seconding? Okay. Now we can get into discussion.
we on the right
do you
track?
want me to read it out again?
Close.
What's that?
Do you want me to read it out again?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, and stop me if it needs to be tweaked a bit.
Just leave your mask off.
That the Economic Development Task Force continues the preparation of its economic development strategy, which incorporates efforts to promote and link health and well-being, and continues the pursuit of the Nanaimo Prosperity Agency focused on implementation of the economic development strategy.
Did everybody hear that? Bob, did you have a comment? And then Andre?
I did, I wanted to suggest that perhaps we consider adding one more sentence to that, if mover and seconder would consider it, and something to the effect that the two organizations would explore the opportunity to share backup house resources.
You okay with that, Zenny, as a seconder? Thank you. Okay, Andre? Well, is this to do with is this an amendment or a friendly amendment, Bob?
The way I was going to structure it is I'm prepared to second Bob's motion.
Okay, so it's a friendly amendment. Okay, now we discuss the friendly amended motion. Go ahead, Andre.
I was on the same page as Bob there, but I might add on top of back end, but ensure, as Jason said, ensuring continued communication and alignment and strategy as well.
We're going to have
It's gonna be a page
motion
long.
that's going to be a page long. Okay, so Doug is okay with that. Zenny, are you okay with that? Okay. We'll make sure.
First guy.
What was the,
Sky got it.
sorry, what was the part that Andre said?
Okay, Andre, can you repeat what you said?
Well, I was just adding to Bob's point that we continue to explore ways to share in the back. I think exactly what Bob said it, but on top of that, maintain constant communication and discuss ways of strategic alignment.
Okay,
So you okay with that, Scott?
we'll see.
So I will make that motion now. Do we need to hear it one more time, or are we okay?
I think,
Well, if they're all friendly amendments, I think we're okay. Tim?
I think we should hear it one more time just before we vote on
Okay,
it
that's
though.
fine, okay.
And then you can,
So in that case, unless there's any more discussion, additions to this lengthy motion, we will then, Doug, can you move the friendly amended motion? Does everybody need it to be read out again?
I think Sky's gonna read it one more time.
Okay,
Yeah,
go
just
for
for
it, Scott.
simplicity, I'll read it out again. So that the Economic Development Task Force continues the preparation of its economic development strategy, which incorporates efforts to promote and link health and well-being, and continues the pursuit of the Nanaimo Prosperity Agency focused on the implementation of the economic development strategy. The two organizations would explore opportunities to share back-of-house resources and maintain constant communication and strategic alignment.
Oh,
I think you got it. And Zenny, you're okay? Who's going to second that? Sorry. Zenny, thank you.
And
Any further?
just for clarification, where it says the two organizations, will say the Economic Development Task Force, and are you wanting the Health and Housing Task Force, or the organization that comes out of the Health and Housing Task
I
Force?
didn't take the task force out because supposedly our duties are going to be ended once we form the,
But perhaps it could say Economic Development Initiative and Health and Housing Initiative.
yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so we'll add the words initiatives to behind economic development and health and housing, because otherwise the whole thing will disappear once the task force is due. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? I don't see any opposed, thank you very much. Okay, so next, unless there's anything further on that, the next is under other business. And I guess what I would like to discuss here, and I appreciate there are at least two potential Class B shareholders, so I don't know whether it's appropriate to discuss this now or not, but I'm sure you can tell me. Is the question of when is it appropriate to actually seek kind of a positive, hopefully a positive response from each of the 5 proposed Class B shareholders, or are there other groups that we should be considering? So I throw the floor open to that. I don't see a wild rush to speak on that. Jason, go ahead.
Basically, maybe let's clarify when we were talking about budgeting, I was actually kind of referring to the fourth budgeting, so knowing sooner rather than later on what the ask is, I think with this in short order for next year, it's going to be important for our board to be able to approve the first capital budget next year. And I don't know how it's going to be contrived, but knowing, I'd say, honestly, by the end of the month or month and a half would be helpful to have some understanding of what the ask is.
Okay. Thanks, Jason. Anybody else?
From the airport's point of view, we've expressed this concern, but the study talks about regional things and then it talks about city things. And when I was consulting with the Staminas group, they expressed some concern that they were excluded, and I wasn't sure at the time whether it was a regional study or a city study, and I was advised it was primarily focused on the city. But then the Staminas takes the view that, well, why is the airport involved? So I am concerned about this because in the study we specifically identified the other 2 First Nations that are in the news group and the Nanaimo group, but then we exclude the Staminas group. So this is causing a problem for us here at the airport because we are very closely aligned because we are in the traditional territory that is, for the most part, considered to be Staminas, not the Nanaimo. So that's a bit of an issue for us. And as far as when would we confirm that we would be a shareholder, I think we need to have this study complete, and we have to have an action plan, and we have to see what the value of it is, and what is the budget. So I think we were at least a couple of months off getting confirmation from my board on whether we would be involved or not involved.
Thanks, Dave. Bob?
So, Jim, based on discussions that have been had so far with all of the potential participants, could there maybe not be two levels of commitment? Maybe one, a commitment in principle subject to the budget, and then maybe finalized once the budget is prepared? Because if there's some hard no's out there, probably better to know it sooner rather than later, and maybe that would give some guidance to this committee.
Yeah, okay. I think the biggest challenge, first of all, I'd like to see is, are they interested in being involved? And I didn't realize, Dave, that there was an issue with the Chemainus band. Because I don't even know if do they take over part of the territory of, or responsible for Area A of the regional district in Nanaimo, or?
What they told me is that, they were surprised that we were involved, but they had not been consulted. So that's the first problem. And then I did ask them, what kind of arrangement do they have with Nanaimo? And they indicated, well, the traditional, divide is the Nanaimo River, which, so then I asked, I made some inquiries, what does the study, what is the area of interest? And I was told it was primarily the city of Nanaimo, which is why the Chemainus would not be involved. But, I feel like they're going to be upset if the airport is involved and they're not involved, because they are a key partner here, and this is definitely their traditional territory here at the airport. And so it's just something that, I'm uncomfortable, because I would like to work with both groups, and if one group is feeling excluded from the regional economy, that's not good.
No, you're right. So maybe what we ought to do, if you have the contact people, maybe Bill and I should go and meet with them to discuss, because quite frankly, I'm open to it, but the problem is, city providing the majority of the funding. Maybe there's a way around any logistical issues with regard to, Bill's kind of closing his eyes here, I don't know.
No, yeah.
I think this is something we need to have a discussion on.
It's a tricky one because in the city of Nanaimo, our key relationship is with Sonoma.
Yeah.
And Synonymous represent Nanaimo from Neck Point north. And so that's why those two are mentioned, but really our key relationship is with Sonoma. I know in Dave it's a tough situation, a very, very tough situation to be in. So I don't know if we just don't include the airport, to be honest with you, because I think if Chemainus was involved and Sonoma took offense to it, then we just have more trouble. So we'll have to think about it. It's not easy.
I'll probably reach out there and get some guidance on that one as well. I think she probably has a better lay of the land.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's a good idea, thanks.
I think
Go ahead, Doug.
I don't want to throw oil on the fire, but I think it is worth having the conversation. I can't imagine an economic development strategy without the airport.
Yeah.
It's one way or another, there's a whole, the question came up earlier about regional versus local. I don't know how you do economic development without it being, it is a central Vancouver Island strategy sort of thing.
Well, maybe what we ought to do is approach the regional district for it to be a Class B shareholder. Because right now they have no economic development in the southern part of the district. So, okay, well, leave that with us, and with me and Bill and myself, and we'll reach out to Sonoma first to get their opinion, because as I agree, they're probably as important, not that I'm diminishing the airport's importance, but if it comes down to one or the other, Chemainus or Nanaimo or Sonoma, I think we'd be a bit of a challenge if we chose Chemainus, but that's the worst case scenario. Go ahead, Andre.
You touched on it quickly, but I don't think it's a bad idea, is the RDN themselves in the key electoral areas, A, B, and C traditionally have paid in. I know B's doing a bit of their own function through their chamber, but I don't think A and C have them, so
They don't
even
have
if we
it.
get a noise, I believe that it would be remiss of us not to invite them to be a Class C shareholder and to pay in some capacity.
Okay, yep. I know who to talk to. Any other comments on that then? So Dave, I guess the best thing to say is we'll get back to everybody once we've come up with a solution for this. And I would think that, I guess we're still going to have to, even though Area A is in the regional district, if the regional district is a shareholder, does that mean we have to involve Chemainus as well? That's the sticking point. So. Okay, any other comments on that? Seeing none, any other business that we need to deal with? Quite a quiet group today. And seeing none, unless there's anything else, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Jenny, you always jump in there. It's seconded by Dave. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch as to when the next meeting is, and thanks, Steve, for your presentation today.
Have a good weekend.